Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're diving into an absolutely epic premise. How exactly did ancient humans successfully colonize every single continent on Earth, except Antarctica, of course, without a single map, without a compass, or even a written record? I mean, think about it. Today, most of us panic if our phones lose GPS for a quick 5-minute drive to the grocery store. But our ancestors did this with no GPS, no combustion engines, and no modern understanding of weather systems written down in any textbook. I really want you to consider this massive puzzle. How did they actually pull this off? Well, it wasn't magic. It was accomplished through raw, accumulated human ingenuity that was applied consistently, generation after generation, until our species quietly spread itself across nearly the entire habitable surface of the planet. All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the generational ripple, how we were built for the journey, temporary geographic shortcuts, mastering the oceans, beasts, and extreme frontiers, and finally, the power of accumulated knowledge. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the generational ripple, dismantling the heroic journey myth. You know, we really need to start by tossing out how the popular imagination usually pictures ancient human migration. The Hollywood myth paints this picture of a single heroic individual, or maybe a small brave group, deciding to walk all the way from Africa to Australia in one thrilling, massive quest for new horizons. But the historical reality? It was actually a slow, compounding drift. It was more like a multi-generational ripple, gradually pushing outward. And it was driven by the absolute most basic need we have: food. Populations simply followed migrating animal herds, tracked seasonal plants, and moved away from depleted resources. So a specific group might only move a modest distance in their entire lifetime, but when you compound that over hundreds or thousands of generations, it adds up to genuinely staggering distances. Which brings us to the specific biological capabilities our ancestors relied upon to do all that walking. Moving right along to Section 2, built for the journey, the human body as a migration tool. Check out this number, 10 to 20. Now, contemporary research looking at traditional walking-based hunter-gatherer societies shows us something pretty amazing. Covering 10 to 20 miles in a single day on foot while carrying supplies wasn't considered some extraordinary athletic feat. For populations whose bodies were conditioned for it right from childhood, this was just a completely normal, highly sustainable daily travel capacity. So, how is this physically possible? Well, our bodies were practically engineered for covering massive overland distances. We utilized an upright, bipedal walking gait, a remarkably efficient sweating system that kept us cool, and an impressive capacity for sustained, moderate-intensity exertion. It's actually the exact same underlying biology used for persistence hunting, just naturally repurposed to make our bodies the ultimate travel machines. But of course, shifting our focus from human biology to the environment itself, survival also required some intense, practical knowledge of the landscape and the climate. Which brings us to Section 3, temporary geographic shortcuts, exploiting the Ice Age. Now, humans didn't just rely on pure willpower to cross the globe. They were opportunistic. They used climate-driven geographic shortcuts that literally do not exist today. Take the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, for instance, which connects the Horn of Africa to the Arabian Peninsula. Today, it is wide open water. But back during the Ice Age climate cycles with drastically lower sea levels, it was considerably narrower and so much more crossable. And a perfect example of this is Beringia. During the last glacial period, enormous quantities of the planet's water were locked up in these massive ice sheets. This exposed a vast, walkable land connection between Siberia and Alaska. So populating the Americas didn't require miraculous ocean crossings with sophisticated boats. It simply required ancient humans to follow game animals eastward across perfectly ordinary, walkable land that just happens to be hidden beneath the ocean today. But as you can guess, not every massive barrier could be walked across. There were genuine open ocean barriers to contend with. Which leads us to Section 4, mastering the oceans, the origins of maritime technology. When we look at the timeline of maritime feats, it is full of absolute mysteries. I mean, even with lower sea levels, getting to Australia from Southeast Asia required crossing deep, open water. Yet ancient humans deliberately made this crossing at least 65,000 years ago. That is tens of thousands of years before the famous Polynesian voyages. Now, exactly what kind of watercraft they used remains a really actively debated archaeological mystery, but they absolutely did it, long before sophisticated maritime travel is documented anywhere else. And you gotta realize these early watercraft weren't just one single universal invention that spread outward from a single spot. No, they were highly specific, hyper-localized solutions that relied on whatever regional materials were available. So we see reed boats popping up in the Mediterranean and South America, dugout tree canoes carved from massive trunks globally, and these incredibly lightweight, skin-covered frame boats made of animal hide and bone up in Arctic regions where wood was totally scarce. But then we have the Polynesian navigators, and their unwritten scientific system is honestly profoundly awe-inspiring. They colonize remote Pacific islands by carefully observing star patterns, reading highly specific cloud formations, and tracking the flight paths of island nesting seabirds. Incredibly, they could even detect completely invisible islands just by reading subtle changes in ocean swell directions, caused by disrupted wave patterns. It's a level of practiced environmental sensitivity that modern researchers actually struggle to fully replicate today. Just imagine trying to navigate an endless ocean with zero instruments, relying strictly on the feeling of the waves beneath your feet. But mastering the oceans was only one piece of this puzzle. Animal domestication and adaptations to the harshest climates completely changed the game for overland travel. So let's look at Section 5, Beasts and Extreme Frontiers, Expanding Capacity and Surviving the Harshest Climates. Obviously, walking on your own 2 feet has limits on what you can carry, but long-distance movement wasn't just about migration anymore. It quickly accelerated into these vast interconnected trade networks made possible entirely by domestication. Using horses, donkeys, and llamas dramatically increased carrying capacity. Camels brought remarkable biological adaptations to extreme heat and water scarcity. And the invention of camel saddle technology, that was a massive innovation. It allowed cargo and riders to be perfectly balanced, which abruptly opened up the massive Sahara and the Arabian Peninsula to extensive, rapid trade long before any modern transport. But pushing into true extreme frontiers, like the freezing Arctic or deep deserts, carried real severe risks. We're talking starvation, dehydration, and death. Doing this required highly specialized survival tech. In the freezing cold, human ingenuity gave us Arctic sleds paired with specifically bred pulling dogs. To survive parched, arid landscapes, they had to engineer evaporation-proof water storage solutions, things like treated animal skins, shaped gourds, and eventually ceramic vessels. And that brings us to Section 6, the power of accumulated knowledge, passing down the science of survival. So how did all this vital information actually survive and compound over time? Well, first, we have to look at the pathways. Rivers like the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, and the Indus weren't just crucial for agriculture. They were reliable, predictable travel corridors. Once boat technology emerged, these ancient water highways allowed massive regional networks to integrate, moving people, goods, and ideas with significantly less physical exertion than hauling everything over land. And today, the incredible thing is, we can track exactly how humans use these routes and spread across the globe. Modern researchers can literally sample modern human DNA, analyze those genetic markers and mutation patterns, and use all of that to reconstruct exact migration routes with unbelievable precision. This genetic tracking beautifully confirms and refines the historical timelines we've gathered from physical archaeological digs. Ultimately, though, surviving these grueling, highly dangerous journeys took a lot more than just individual physical endurance. It demanded intense social cooperation. We're talking careful group planning, shared resource management, and extremely close attention to seasonal weather patterns. All of this formed a massive, unwritten scientific library that was strictly passed down through generations via intense oral tradition and direct apprenticeship. And that brings us right back to our core thesis. Humanity conquered the globe not through one single brilliant event or some dramatic, heroic journey. It was achieved through patient, accumulated human ingenuity, slowly, steadily expanding the boundaries of where humans could actually survive and thrive. It was the patient accumulation of hard-won knowledge and simply the willingness to just keep walking a little bit further. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. If patient, generational knowledge allowed our ancestors to literally conquer the globe without a map, without a compass, and without a written word, what extreme frontiers might that exact same deep-seated resilience unlock for humanity's future? Next time you look up at the stars or out at the ocean, just remember the awe-inspiring historical perspective of what our species is truly capable of. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.